Hello everyone, welcome to the new episode of Professionals Unplugged. I am your host Utkarsh Shukla, and let me introduce you to my guest Marty. Marty is coming here for the second time. In the first episode, we discussed his journey from New Zealand to USA, like how he moved from New Zealand to USA uh, in order to sacrifice for his wife that she wanted to study in USA. So he followed her and he followed his career in USA and got selected for the international team. Now being selected for the USA women's team and also coaching there. So thank you so much, Marty, for joining us again.
Pleasure. Good to be back.
Thank you so much, Marty. So let's begin with our questions. Can you please tell us the importance of Test cricket nowadays, since T20 is being peaking? Do you think Test cricket still holds that importance?
It's a really good question. For me and for people my age and older, we absolutely love the Test cricket more than ever. And sometimes when we're watching T20, it becomes a bit repetitive, and you're seeing the same players playing for different teams, and it's hard to really get that same enjoyment level that you can get from Test cricket. So for me, it's sad to see what's happening with Test cricket, and um, I think it's always going to have its place, but I am concerned that it's going to get smaller and smaller because the new generation is only going to be exposed to 80% T20, 10% 50 over, 10% Test cricket. So they don't really have that same level of passion that we do with it. And also, the numbers make more sense with T20 financially. Time-wise, people are busy. It makes more sense. It's colorful. It's engaging. So I completely get why T20 is growing, but it's tough for people like me and many others that love Test cricket and get that true joy out of watching a Test match and the twists and turns and that most people can't quite understand, because if you don't know, it looks boring. But if you do know, it's certainly very entertaining. So um, I hope we can preserve it. I'm certainly concerned, especially as players start to take or turn away central contracts for money. That's going to be a problem for Test cricket, because if someone can go play a three match Test series and get X amount of money, or they can go play a T20 league and get this amount of money, then it's eventually going to outweigh the Test cricket. So I hope the ICC has some good plans in place to find a way that it stays around, because it's a great format of the game, and it's the true cricket that
Right.
we love.
And I think the Test Championship Trophy that is being started is also a good process in order to maintain the freshness in the Test cricket. And also, I think there is a big part of fitness when it comes to players who are playing Test cricket rather than players who are just playing T20s. Right? Do you feel the same?
Yeah, it's a really different fitness. T20 and stuff, you're sprinting around, it's quick, heart rate's going to be high. Test cricket, it's like going for a hike. You're on your feet for a long time. There's some hills. The mind starts to think a bit more, and so it takes stamina and it takes longevity. So a completely different fitness, but one that's really important. And for fast bowlers, it's another challenge as well, coming back for long spells, time after time, perhaps 2 or 3 days in a row without getting a rest. So it's definitely tough, and I think a lot of it's mental fatigue as well. You're spending a lot of time out on the park, a lot of time to think, a lot of time to overthink. So often when you come into bat or you come into bowl, the mind's already played that innings 100 times, so you're actually quite tired when you get out there. Whereas T20, it's nice and quick. You don't have to think too much. So that mental fatigue is also really high over a Test match, as well as the fitness aspect.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this point. And what about you? Like how you maintain your fitness? Like you are training as well, and the same time living in US. So, what's the secret behind your fitness?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not playing cricket now, but still as a coach, I place it as a high value to stay fit and because I've got to throw balls, I've got to move around, I've got to be on my feet, I've got to motivate. So for me, staying fit is really important part of the job. And if I'm going to tell players that they need to be fit, then I think it's better if it comes from me in a good, healthy position. So for me, I spend a lot of time surfing, which is an extreme workout. So I love to do that to keep naturally fit, and then I do circuits in my garage at home. Actually, a lot of shoulder work to keep my shoulders strong for throwing, and then I'll do some sprints on the treadmill and that. So the surfing is great. Then I'm spending a load of time on my feet coaching, and then some circuits and stuff just to keep that strength and prevent injuries as a coach. But as a player, I do a lot of running. I like to stay really fit. So when you're tired, the mind's strong and stuff. So I think that aspect has a big impact on your mental strength as well. If you're really fit, you're typically nice and strong for those big moments.
Right, I totally agree with you. So, what are the those exercises that you do for your shoulders, like for throwing purposes? So, and do you do intense workout for them, or like push-ups or those things?
Yeah, I do a lot of band work. So just rotations, and if I don't do that, I tend to feel my shoulders a little bit more. And yeah, after a bit of throwing, those shoulders will start to. So if I continue to do my band work 3 to 4 times a week, then throwing becomes a lot easier. I also, since sort of surfing is my passion now, for fun at least, I'm not very good. I incorporate workouts that are specific to that as well. So I guess that's where my sporting background comes into it. It's like I start doing something and then I want to
Right.
do the 1%ers that can help me be a better surfer, because there's a lot of good surfers and it's a bit demoralizing when you're out there and you're like, oh man, why are these guys so good? But they've been surfing since they're like 3 or 4. And
Right.
so I try to do workouts that are specific to that as well.
That's great. So, while being a selector, like what are the things that you look at a player apart from their skills? Do you also try to see other aspects such as team management or their behavior? And what are the parameters on which they are judged?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And for me, I've always held like team culture as a really high aspect for selection. Um, so we're looking at body language. How are they helping their teammates? How are they responding when they have a bad day? Because if they have a bad day with the bat or something and then that's them for the day, then they're not adding a lot of value to the team. Whereas if they have a bad day with the bat and they're determined to get out there and help their team in the field or help their teammates and support the batters, and that's a big plus for me. The more of the players like that you get, the more that team culture is going to really thrive, and people are going to feel comfortable. And even when they have bad days, they still feel part of that team. So that's definitely a big aspect. US is a really big country, so it does have its challenges in the sense of getting to see players enough. Um, so that's definitely tough. And in one pocket the level might be here, one pocket the level might be here, and trying to take those things into account, or whether someone's playing on concrete, someone's playing on grass. There's many moving parts. So I think as selectors, we just have to have good conversations and try factor those things in as well as we can. Um, and just understand that we're not going to get it perfect. As long as we're being fair and consistent, I think that's the most important thing. And then being accountable when something doesn't quite work out, putting a hand up and saying, yeah, that was the wrong pick. But as long as our process is solid and the communication's good, then I think we can get closer and closer to getting that right squad on the park.
Yeah, I totally agree with this point. I mean, even if the player is having a bad day, he should be able to contribute via his team management skills, or he should be at the
Yeah.
ground trying to motivate others. So that's a very good point, I think. And while selecting, I think most of the people think it's only about skills, but I think you have mentioned pretty valid points. You also observe how the people are behaving when they are having a bad day, or how they are behaving with the team members. Those are, I think, very crucial points. And in terms of earning, there were a lot of questions I got from your yesterday's interview. Like people were asking if you can give us the range, or is there any difference between earning at USA and New Zealand cricket? So if you can just enlighten us on the same, not the amount, but if you can just tell us the range or how things works.
Yeah, so um, even in New Zealand, the contracts comparatively to Australia, England, India, very small, very, very small compared to that. In the US, they are mostly, when they're on tour, getting daily rates, which might range from $200 to $500 a day. And that'll be inclusive of the match payments and stuff. So it's not a huge amount of money. And most of them are certainly working as well and have to take time off during that period. And hence the challenge when it comes to these things. And often there's disputes because the players want more, but ultimately US cricket doesn't have more. So it's a tricky conversation. It's like, so I'm just really hopeful that they can generate some money and put these players on some central contracts that they can really commit to this full time. I think it'll make a huge difference. There's a lot of very good cricketers in the US, not just the ones that are playing, but there's heaps more that are not playing for the US at the moment. But without the consistent central contract and the facilities, then it's hard for them to really showcase their skills. So I think if those two things are taken care of, you will continue to see the US grow, and it'll be less of a shock when they beat a team like Pakistan or something like that. Because what they've just done now is on the back of not being paid, barely any resources, barely any warm-up games. So that's quite an incredible effort. And a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about US cricket. And often it's warranted, but I prefer to put a bit of a positive spin on it and say, man, how on earth have they achieved that with the resources we have? So for me, it's that optimism that, hey, look, if we do get a few more things right, where can we be in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year?
Yeah, I think the same thing what happened with Afghanistan. So BCCI provided them a stadium in India, and now they are in the semi-finals, right? So do you think more stadiums in USA, because the one that was in New York that got dismantled after the World Cup? So do you think having more resources can be beneficial as well?
100%. Just some turf grounds with turf nets to the side where they can have as many matches as they need, as many practice sessions as they need, will just significantly change things in the US. Definitely some grounds have been developed in Houston, Dallas, and that's had a big impact on cricket in that area. And in fact, a lot of the good players have moved to that area. But I think to grow it bigger, you want that same thing in different states as well. So that'll really boost the numbers and the level of the game here.
Yeah, I believe the same. And also about the central contract, I mean, in New Zealand, like Kane Williamson, he said no to the central contract, and few months back, Trent Bolt also said no to central contract, right? So do you think that the country's vote should allow people to go out and play? Because Kane Williamson mentioned that he wanted to go and play at South Africa T20 League, which is not allowed by New Zealand contract. What are your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because the problem is if New Zealand cricket say no, sorry, you can't play that, Kane's going to say, okay, then well, I'm not going to play for New Zealand because the money differential is so much that he's eventually going to say, well, sorry guys, as much as I'd love to play for New Zealand, this doesn't make sense for me and my family. So I think it's going to be a challenging period for New Zealand cricket. It has some money, but it cannot compete with contracts like England and India and Australia. I think probably those are the three nations that can easily continue to give central contracts. The rest are going to really struggle because it's just not going to make sense for players. So I think it's something we're going to have to get used to, and we're going to have to live with it. It's sad to see tours when New Zealand send like a B or a C team instead of all the players you expect to be playing. And but I think that's just going to be the way it is.
So what, according to you, is the main reason why India, England, and Australia are providing so much high amount while New Zealand and other nations they are a bit low? Do you think it's because of the love of cricket in those countries rather than other one? Because New Zealand is also performing well, like I think for last 20, 30 years, they are also in semi-finals or finals. Also won the Test Championship, I think the first one, inaugural one. So, what do you think is the main difference between the countries, or why they are not able to generate that amount?
I think a lot of it's got to do with population. So just numbers wise, New Zealand cricket has about 5 million people. So to generate the revenue through TV rights and sponsorship and those things is a lot more challenging because smaller population, less massive companies, less money. So it doesn't filter down as much. Therefore, they can't pay someone $1 million a year on a central contract because they will run out of money and completely ruin New Zealand cricket. Whereas in India, let's not say the money's infinity, but there's so much there, right? That any amount's fine for Kohli or Australia, similar within reason. And I would say like a bigger population, more people playing cricket, bigger companies for sponsorship, stronger test teams, so generate more series with India, Australia, and get the TV rights. Obviously, New Zealand doing very well actually, and it's unfortunate that they don't get those bigger series more often because those TV rights is what basically funds New Zealand cricket, especially when India tours to New Zealand. Those TV rights are what keeps New Zealand afloat for many years actually.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on this point. So I got my answers, and I hope everyone else got their answers that they asked in the last video. So thank you so much, Marty, for this conversation. It's really a great conversation on cricket that we have, from Test cricket to depending on why we should have more contracts or how cricket is evolving in every country. So it was really a great experience talking to you. Hope to connect with you again someday on the same. Right. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thanks, Marty.